This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. And I would. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the evening of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. And tonight, I have the pleasure of giving to you the band, the man, known as Sleeplore. Sleeplore is Clyde Rosencrance. He is a local boy. He is one of our own from the Scranton, Pennsylvania area. And he gives us something bucolic, melodic, melancholic, and gorgeous. This song is called Just Fine. It is his new single, for which there is a music video on his YouTube channel that I strongly suggest you check out. All of his videos are very professional. His music, the production, the instrumentation, it is so well wrought. I mean, we are dealing with a producer, an engineer here. He knows his way around a mixing board, and a guitar, and a singing voice. I mean, it's the total package. There's nothing not to love about Sleeplore. In issue 391 of Alternative Press, Sleeplore was one of the 100 artists you need to know. I've been haunting Clyde since I've had a show to come on. I am a huge fan. I have been a supporter of his for time immemorial. I've been going to see his bands play in the area. I've always been very impressed with him, not only as a musician, but as a person. Clyde's just a great guy. You have my word on that. And if you're paying any attention to the music that is playing behind me, I can't believe that this isn't on commercial radio. But what is commercial radio now anymore, anyway? Get some business out of the way. If you like what you're hearing, if you enjoy this show, please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Go to my social media, give us a little support there, and I will be forever in your debt. Now listen, if you really, really like this, you can buy physical product, shirts, CDs, what have you, at sleeploremusic.com. And with that, it is my great pleasure to give to you Mr. Clyde Rosencrance of Sleeplore on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
How are you, Clyde?
Doing all right. How are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Just kind of trying to chill out from the day. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
Coming home
hear
from
you, man. It's still coming full force over here. I don't know about you.
yeah, same. Coming home from work, I just my wife and I are on a new home hunt, and that
Oh, nice.
well, it's also kind of like playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded M16.
The market's a little tough right now, isn't it?
Yeah, even when you win, you lose. That's
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing. But outside of that, like it seems to me like I know you're grinding, but
Yeah.
it's bearing a lot of fruit. I've seen, you've gone from like just singles and then the EP, and like you're really hitting on all cylinders right now. And you're traveling all over the place too, from what I can see.
Me?
How's that been? Like, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, so it's been interesting. I mean, so I've been making music a while, you know.
yeah,
So a lot of this stuff has really been like stuff that I've had tabled from other projects and things like that. And so like up to a certain point, at least up until like sometime last year, it was basically just like, let me dig up some of this old stuff that had in my heart. I always wanted to do something with, and let me just like put some new, fresh stuff into it, some fresh perspective. Um, so in a sense, it was like a little bit easier because I had the basis for a lot of things, but in another sense, it was really hard because it was all like old stuff I was jaded on and
yeah.
didn't really even like anymore. So um, there were definitely a couple moments in there, but it got to a point even where with a couple of the tracks, like I brought in some other people, and I just kind of like took my hands off the wheel, and I'm like, let's whatever happens, like
Yeah.
let's just do it. Let's just put it out because it's like it's more important to like get the weight off your shoulders at that point than it is to really scrutinize every little detail and whatnot. I mean, yeah, there's actually a really great Rick Rubin quote that, which of course now I feel like the last couple of years he's been putting all these quotes out there and everything that people are
Yeah.
sharing. But there was one that it was basically just like something to the extent of you're successful as soon as you put your work out into the world.
Yeah.
And when you really think about that, it's like I think what he means is like you're successful, at least yourself, because like you've achieved that thing, you've accomplished getting it out there, and you can now free yourself of it and move on.
Because you're your biggest hurdle, right?
Yeah,
You're your
totally.
worst critic and your
Yeah,
biggest hurdle. I mean, and you've been playing in bands for a long time, brother.
yeah,
You've been grinding in this area for a while, in the Scranton
yeah,
area. You finally transcended the local boy thing too, which
yeah,
I'm really, I've been a cheerleader of yours for a while.
yeah. I
Um,
appreciate that.
Always, brother. And you know what I mean? Like it seemed to me that even though you're allowing other people into this is more you than you've kind of ever been in like the
Yeah.
past like 15 years.
Yeah, for sure. It's this is like when people say it's like their pet project, or this is like the other side of me, or whatever, that I don't normally talk about or whatever. Like that's this for me.
Yeah.
This is like, and it's not necessarily like, and I know we'll probably get into a lot of like interesting stuff, like just how knowing your content and everything and knowing where we're probably going to go. But like
Yeah.
it's not like any of this stuff is like deep dark stuff for me or anything like that. It's just, I've always been sort of caught up in, part of it is like pleasing others,
Right.
and
Well,
like,
yeah.
but we're human, so
Yeah.
like it's kind of part of it. You get that little rush of energy or whatever. And producing music for other artists, working with other artists, just being a member in other bands, it's always like, you don't necessarily, or at least I there's been occasions, but most of the time it's like, I want this to be a collective thing. I don't want to upset the apple cart or whatever. With
Hmm.
this stuff, it's like, it's kind of just my thing, and people are going to like it or they're not. There's plenty of people, like the last track I just put out, like, and there's some people that I think there's a lot of like people that do like it, but
Yeah.
there's plenty of people that, like, I sent it out to some playlists that have featured me in the past, that kind of stuff, never heard back anything. So like clearly there are people who don't care because it's like this longer, slower, drawn out kind of track, and it's a little more like a cinematic type thing than it is like the summer of 23 hit that they're hoping for.
Sure.
So
But in the same token, like to me, that smacks more of like, I've always kind of likened what you did to a cross between like the Pixies and the Cure
yeah,
at their poppiest and their most dirgy and jangly. This to me, it's almost like you're channeling more of like I don't want to say Radiohead because that's too fucking easy, but certainly, The Cure at the pornography level,
Yeah.
or the Pixies when they were doing Surfer Rosa and they were really playing with sound. They were experimenting with the entire sonic palette, and they weren't marrying one tempo. This is a punk song, it's got to be a punk song. This is a post-punk song, it's got to be that. You let the song serve itself, and that's what's important. And it doesn't sound, and it's just a slower tempo, brother. That's all it is. It's still you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this one definitely has that, like, people talk about the Pixies, the soft, loud thing. It's got that in a sense. It's a little more, the loud part is a little more bottled up and obviously waits till later in this particular track. But like, it definitely has that dynamic. I'm a huge fan of dynamic music in general. So, a lot of my stuff definitely has more of a dynamic to it. It's less polished, like it's produced still, most of it, but like it's less of the, like, let's give you this sterilized pancake wave sound that is going to sound like laser beams into your ears. It's more of the, I don't mind as a listener if I have to, like, between the song adjust things, just kind of sit back and veg out and just really appreciate what it is or whatever. And I do believe, like, even when I'm working with an artist and we're making an album per se, or at least a collection of songs, I still, unless it's like a concept album, there's a band I'm working with now, just starting to work with it, it goes down that road. But unless it's like a concept album, I still believe every song is its own product per se. It's its own thing. Like, serve the song,
Yeah, I mean, we have so many examples of albums that, like, let's take the Blue Album, Weezer, for example.
Yeah,
the songs fit together, but they're different moods,
totally
different characters. My Name Is Joan is not the same as Say It Ain't So, is not the same as In the Garage, which is, in my opinion, the greatest Weezer song, just because of what they talk about. And it very much speaks to my generation specifically, because I'm old as fuck, and we were, you know what I mean? That's what we were into back then, along with punk hardcore and hip hop and everything else that was happening. But to me, it seems like you digested all of those aforementioned things, plus like the whole alternative boom, and you allowed all of that to kind of, like, not affect you, but be a part of your arsenal.
Yeah.
And I do kind of want to, like, get into that. Like, you're a bit younger than me, but we're still of a similar era.
Yeah.
What was that first hint, that first kiss that you couldn't slough off for music?
I mean, how far back, how deep do you want to go?
As deep as you can get. I mean, like, I go back to the 70s. Like, I was born in the 70s, so T-Rex and Bowie for me.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I had a long Bowie period for sure. So for me, where music really started was like at a very, very young age. I don't even remember how old I was, but less than 10. But I remember when I was growing up, and neither one of my parents are like musical, but they both appreciate it, and they both, I am appreciative that they both would allow me to indulge in, whatever it was. Not that they knew what it was or how to help me find it, but they were okay once I found it,
Sure.
So like my first forte into music, I would always just pick up on things from life, things that would just like be in passing, And my first real thing that hooked me was what I described as the music with the voices, I believe is what I said when I was a child. So I remember my parents bringing me to, I think in Clark Summit, it was Gallery of the Sound when it was there, and going up to the counter and asking the guy behind the counter, like, do you know what he's talking about? Like, we don't even know what he's talking about. He didn't quite know, but I did end up leaving with the Beach Boys' greatest hits and something else. I know like Chubby Checker was one of my first cassettes. But what I was referring to was actually doo-wop music.
Oh yeah.
And it just, like, as soon as I heard it when I was a kid, I was like, how are these people, like the Bowser voice, the real deep, da, 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 and all the other voices, like, how are these people doing this? This is so neat. So I never got to really go down deep into that path, but thankfully the Beach Boys found me in that way. And actually, I think it became sort of a hipster kind of thing or whatever, but like Pet Sounds as a child was one of my favorite records,
that is a work of pure genius. I mean, like Brian Wilson's a god.
Yeah.
That's not hipster. That's just taste.
It is what it is. I mean, you can't really deny it. And I definitely went deep on the, Brian Wilson Beach Boys, and like that got me into surf music in general. Like I really do think Pet Sounds is a completely separate thing, but I also got really big into surf music, surf guitar, surf rock, and all that kind of stuff. Early on, that was a huge influence for me, which is interesting because when I eventually discovered the Pixies, a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff was in there too. And when I first heard the Pixies, I didn't really like it. Like when I first heard Surfer Rose, I was like, this is okay,
It's atonal. A lot of it's
Right.
atonal. It's very, very, it's their most hardcore
Yeah.
record,
Yeah. Yep. So when I first heard that, I was like, I don't know. But after listening to it for a few times, my friend Matt had it, and we were in a band at the time, several bands back. And I gave it a couple chances, and eventually it grew on me. And then I discovered the rest of their stuff. Like, it their sound was really, I think, important for me for a long period of time. So a lot of things happened in between,
Yeah.
those two different distinct eras, like going from the Beach Boys and doo-wop, that kind of stuff, whatever it was I was looking for as a child, to finding the Pixies. But you mentioned Bowie. That was another thing when I was around that same time, actually, like when I was probably, I don't even know, 10 years old, 12 years old, somewhere in there. I came across Bowie, and I ended up buying a really cool box set. At the time it was cassette, and I think it was called Sound and Vision.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It was so good. It had a lot of his early demos and stuff like that, and I got really hooked on like the early acoustic demos. Like it sounded like he was in a bedroom.
Yeah.
That stuff was really cool. I didn't get as into like the glam rock stuff, but I still love Bowie. I was just watching, or at least listening to, some of the music from Labyrinth the other day.
Oh yeah.
It's just every bit of it.
There's some
So
Bowie in his inception at the very beginning. He was very much a Bob Dylan devotee,
yeah,
as was
totally.
Mark Bolan from T-Rex.
Yeah,
They were Dylan devotees. So somehow, by fate, chance, or in between, Dylan's kind of at fault for glitter rock and glam.
that's interesting. Wow, never thought of that.
Right?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lineage there, I guess, to unpack, but yeah, that was an interesting era. A lot of really interesting things happened in that era.
But we could blame it for a lot too, and I can hear it in what you do. I hear the Pixies in what you do, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of Weezer. There's a lot of like, even like that early 2000s like pop punk kind of explosion.
yeah,
Just in their they were all devotees of No Effects and Bad
yeah,
Religion, and bands that really knew how to rein in that whole Beach Boys thing. So that's kind of like the through line, really.
yeah,
We all punks worship the Beach Boys.
yeah,
All
yeah,
punks worship like Chubby Checker and 50s rock and roll. The Misfits are just a 50s rock and roll band with horror
yeah,
lyrics, and Elvis
yeah.
worshiping Satan.
Yep,
Like
yep,
they're rock and roll continues to be rock and roll no matter
yeah,
what. I think what makes it still rock and roll still so prescient, important, and like at the fore of driving culture is people who put their own stamp on it and make it emotional.
yeah,
Like Motley Crue's cool, but I don't feel anything.
yeah. Right. Unless you're like out at a party or something, and you just want to kind of feel like you're at a party for 10
Yeah,
minutes or whatever, like put a couple Motley Crue tracks on.
but I'm not going to become introspective, try to figure
Yeah,
something out about my soul and my spirit via their music as the soundtrack. It's just not the way things work.
yeah,
That's cool. There's a place for everything, but I think you fall more into the latter.
yeah.
I think you're like for the thinking man, for the feeling man, like for the Elliott Smith fan
Right.
of the world.
For
Um,
sure.
do you ever find yourself like, and you said you're like not on the dark side at all. It's just
Yeah.
the way things come out. Do you find that a lot of people who are kind of like in that headspace, like coming to you and thanking you and kind of like trying to meet you on that level?
Yeah, it's weird, man. This whole project, like, I said before, this was just like, at least the start of it was music that I had on the sidelines that,
Mhm.
I wrote over a long period of time. Each one of the songs was kind of written at a different period up to a point. And so there wasn't necessarily like a cohesiveness as I was writing them or anything like that, other than they came from me and experiences, I suppose, that I had in life. But, I started putting songs out, and I would start getting like the most random messages on social media and like even YouTube comments from people all across the world. And it's not like I'm still nobody. It's not like I'm a big deal or anything, but like you put your stuff out there and you just never know who's going to find it and what it's going to mean to them. Like I remember especially early on receiving just like these little 5-word messages that are something like, I found this and I really needed it.
Yeah.
Or like I found this and I felt it, or just something really brief like that. And to randomly get a message like that from a stranger, is just like it leaves me dumbfounded, because for me, even putting this music out, I still have a hard time at times connecting with my own music and understanding what it means. Like you're a musician, like when you write stuff and you put it together, like I'm not one that necessarily always writes with a specific intention in mind, and like I'm a terrible lyricist. Like I can't sit down necessarily and write something specific. Like I try, and I'll do, like, for fun, I'll try to write some things about like an old house down the road that's abandoned or whatever. Like what would that feel like if I wrote lyrics about that, like Tom Waits, like oh my god, like talk about like visualization through words, like
what's he
unbelievable.
building in there?
Exactly. Like you see it, you feel it, you hear it, you can see the colors. It's incredible. That's not me. I aspire someday to be there, and I have friends that are good like that. But like, so for me to hear that something that I put out to the world has impacted anyone in some way is really remarkable. And it kind of it validates in some way like what I'm doing, because I'm clearly not going to be like on MTV, well, not MTV's anything, but I'm not going to be on The Voice tomorrow, right? Or some popular show or anything like that. Like, so I'm not going for fame or anything like that, but to just put out something that you created and, have it mean something to someone is really pretty awesome.
And I think the reason why that is because you're not like going for something very specific lyrically.
Yeah.
I can glean from it what I like. I mean, there are certainly some lyrics that are very personal.
Sure.
I can pick that out just because I'm a lyricist. I'm a writer. I know, but you paint it in such a way that it can be applicable to pretty much whatever situation. Great songwriters do that kind of thing. Billy Corrigan does that.
Yeah.
Today is the greatest day I've ever known. It's about suicide to Billy Corrigan. To me, I was 16 when that came out. I had already been a fan of them, but this was like Siamese Dream kind of cemented it for me. And to me, that was like that summer's like anthem. Like we were out doing no good.
Oh yeah,
partying, getting stoned, doing the thing in Pittston as we do.
Yeah.
And like it not until years later did I really glean from it the sorrow, the absolute utter mental destruction that he was feeling at that moment. But he'd written it in such a way that it was oblique. It was almost like you couldn't pick that out unless you'd almost heard him tell you that.
Yeah.
You write like that. And I think that is very, very important. And I applaud it because it can mean so many things to so many people. You could conceivably have 10 people feel 10 different things about the same set of lyrics.
Yeah.
You're saying that you don't think that's a talent, but I think it is.
Wow. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm aware, at least, after the fact, that's kind of the way that I write, or at least have written, because there's actually a lot of stuff. I've been working on that a little bit. I've been working on, trying to write in different ways, because it's like, for me, this project is that outlet where I can experiment. I can do whatever I want. It's my project, which is cool. That's the cool thing. It's self-indulgent in some respects,
as it should be.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the nature of it. But I definitely have noticed that about many of the tracks. It's like, they are broad enough that you can kind of paint your own vision, paint your own picture. And I love when, I hear a song, it's like, well, that means something to me. The writer couldn't possibly have known what that specific thing is to me, that experience that I had, that I'm relating to that. So it's cool that like everyone can kind of approach it and have their own unique experience with it, and
Yeah.
it becomes their own from that standpoint.
I think that's what really grabbed me about like what you do, what the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s alternative scene, be it The
Yeah.
Cure, the Smiths, all the way to the Pixies and Nirvana, of course,
Yeah.
Soundgarden, they all kind of like they weren't hammering you in the face with
Yeah.
intention. And having come from the hardcore and punk scene, I was, a part of a scene that hammered you in the face with
Yeah.
intention. Like
Yep.
you're either this or you're that, and like there was an austerity to that and a sincerity to that that obviously resonated with me. But in the same token, like you need art too. You need poetry. You need to be, moved in a particular way that doesn't pander.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
and that's that sweet spot where
Yeah.
you're sitting, where there's a few, like I actually think Tom York does inhabit that same space, even though he can get up his own ass.
Yeah.
I
For
I
sure.
still I still think he's a genius.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah, he's fucking incredible.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like the world needs that. Music needs that, and
Yeah.
I think there's I think there isn't enough of it right
Yeah.
now. I think we're in a severe drought for like guitar-based,
Yeah.
well-written, poetic music.
Yeah.
You're very fearless with the way you present it too. I'm kind of like I'm dumbfounded that coming off of Alternative Press having listed you as one of the bands you absolutely need to know to getting crickets from this song, it tells me that people are really tone deaf.
Yeah. I mean, it's, people are going to listen to, I guess, who they follow,
Right.
and where they, whoever their Jesus is, right? Like if Alternative Press, if they're listening to My Chemical Romance every 10 minutes because Alternative Press is cramming it down their throats, and then all of a sudden they see Sleeplore and they're like, oh, this must be cool. Let me like this too for a hot minute,
Mhm.
Um, that could be what happens. But if that's a door into people discovering, and I think it has been. I mean, there's people that still reach out from a lot of that big wave that happened,
Yeah.
which is cool. But I mean, people are always gonna like kind of come and go, whatever's hot, whatever's kind of in front of them. Um, but at the same time, I mean, I'm not. It's the hard thing, and that's one of the things I struggle with is like, am I writing for a specific audience or am I not? And if I am, who are they? Like I have no idea. I'm just creating this stuff as I hear it. Well, I appreciate that. Your hands raised, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, but that's the hard thing for me to identify is like, all right, it would be easier, I think. It would be easier for me if I had, like, if I think of it like running a business, if I had a specific consumer and a specific product I was making, I could just, crank out songs all day long for that, particular use case or whatever.
Yeah.
But in my case, I have no idea, what that is other than like, let me get this out of my system, whatever this thought is in the moment. And hopefully I capture it in a way that, you know, really encapsulates what I'm feeling at that moment, and that it resonates with someone else. There are, I will say that, so the last song I just put out, Just Fine, the one that I was, saying it has sort of mixed reviews on, I think.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. That one, it was inspired by that moment when Alt Press, picked up the first time they picked me up and picked up that song, Let Go.
Yeah.
It was kind of inspired a little bit by that high that you get when, like, look, this is the first track I'm putting out for this project. All of a sudden, Alternative Press has it on their homepage. I'm like, what even is this? Is it like, I'm like, literally, I'm absolutely nobody because this project didn't exist yesterday, like,
Right.
and all
Right.
of a sudden they pick it up. But if you listen to it, like even listen to the guitar a little bit and stuff, like it's got that droning open, whatever it is, G or whatever it is, the string, that whole kind of thing going on, the single note melodic thing. And kind of like, it was, for me, it was almost like let me give a call and response to that moment, so that's where that song came from a little bit. So not that it was written for those people necessarily, but it was more like, for me, like a guttural response to that moment. interesting thing is though, I have another song. I've got so many songs that I've yet to put out, but
Yeah.
another one I'm working on right now that I recorded a while back. I wrote a while back, around that similar time, and it's man, it's like, like when you write a song and it really just hits you, and it's like, if you wrote it and a year later you still love it, 2 years later, whatever, 6 months later you love it still, even though you've like beaten it to death, recorded it 100 times, and like I was recording guitars a couple weeks ago, and I spent 3 days recording guitars, all different sounds, all different ways, and everything else, and I love them all, and I'm like, this number one, I think this is going to be really good.
Yeah.
Number two, it's like, okay, I don't know what direction to go with it, because I could go with it. I could do the people pleaser thing where I try to please that particular crowd. And man, I'll tell you, like it fits that. It actually, this is the first song I feel like I've written that's like, wow, it really speaks to that particular crowd that, like I never saw myself coming from that crowd necessarily. I've just always been kind of a drifter. I do whatever.
Yeah.
But this song really could speak to that crowd. It could also really speak to like, if I take it a totally different direction, almost like I love Sparklehorse,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it could totally, I could lo-fi it down. It's almost like, off one of his early records. And it's like, it's a little more up tempo. So like a lot more people I think will like it just because of that. But it's like, which direction do I go? And they're both really good. So, yeah, it's tough, man. It's really tough.
Well, I think the only way to really adequately serve a song is to not worry about who's going to hear it. And I think that's been your strength thus far.
Yeah.
Not to inject myself into your
No,
writing
hey.
process at all, but I think honestly your greatest success has been the fact that before alternative press ever
Yeah.
heard of you, you were doing whatever you felt was right and served the song for yourself
Yeah.
as the worst critic on earth of
Yeah.
you. To
It's
go
true.
back to Rick Rubin, the greatest success is to get past that hurdle, that inner prick that's like, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
You get past that. It doesn't matter what master you're serving on the exterior. It's if it passes you, it's already good enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sticking to your guns is the greatest. It's the greatest way to telegraph what sort of an artist you are. So
Yeah.
don't pander to these people.
Yeah.
Don't do
Yeah.
it. Just don't do it.
Yeah. There's outlets for that, certainly. Like I do a lot of recording and writing with, other people and that kind of stuff, like even sync music and just other random projects and stuff. So, I can fulfill that desire elsewhere,
Yeah.
You're right. This project was, and is all about just like, what I feel and what I, think is most suitable for whatever piece of material or whatever. So
Now, what's playing this live been like for you?
it's been fun. I never wanted to be honest. I do like playing live. I do. And I miss playing as often as I used to. I mean, I've been
Oh
in
yeah,
bands.
you've been playing forever. I know.
Yeah. I mean, and there were times in my musical career where I was playing every single day for months straight,
Yeah.
so it's definitely, something I miss to an extent. I wouldn't want to do it every day right now, but still a little more regular. So this stuff, I never, it was, well, I should say it was never intended to be a live thing, just because, you know, there's the thought behind this was, serve the song, make it the best sort of recorded music, that I can, think of, or maybe not the best, but like the most suitable maybe, or just whatever I'm hearing or feeling. Not worrying about like presenting it live in any way or anything like that. So I never really gave it a lot of thought. And, early on, getting a lot of people reaching out like, hey, would you do this show? Would you do this, that? And I'm like, I'm not a band. Like, I'm just a guy,
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work to put a band together and try to get something across, in a way that was never intended for that,
Not to mention saying, hey, you got to play this the way this
Right.
is. Like,
Right. It's a totally different thing. It's like I might as well just like hire a band, like and just get like a bunch of, I don't know, like union people to come out and play the show or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
it's not really what it's all about either. It's not a lot of fun for me. So the couple shows that I've done have been things that were a little bit more important, things that were a little more interesting or meaningful. And one of those shows was Keith Perks put on a show for the Steamtown Music Conference a couple years ago, or
Yep.
Electric City Music Conference, and it was on the anniversary of a really important date for him, and he's a friend of mine. He's done a lot for me and for this project, and it was a really important night anyway, for as a part of the conference and everything else. And I was like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, that seems like a worthy night to do it, so put a band together, and went out and did it and worked through some of the songs. And some of the stuff we had to arrange a little bit differently, because I wasn't going to bring out, like, some of the songs I have like live strings and things like that, and I'm not going to go nuts with all that. So there were a couple songs that we arranged a little bit differently, did some different guitar parts, drum parts, things like that. And so that was kind of fun to work through that. And there's even a couple songs that like this song I have called Weighted, that it's pretty high up there vocally. So when I went to sing that again, in a full band setting or whatever, I was like, yeah, I don't know, it's probably not good if I do that. At least not somewhere in the middle of the set, maybe at the end of the set. Otherwise, let's transpose that. So ended up transposing it and doing an arrangement that was a little more like electric full band shoegaze sort of thing, which is really cool. So it was fun to have that outlet, because all of these songs, and like a song like that, it's such a simple song that you can go so many directions with it. And I have other recorded versions of it. Like I did a version of that song where it was total Pink Floyd, and it's just like spacey. And at the end I did like this David Gilmour guitar stuff and everything, which is, I love that stuff too. I don't do it all the time, because I mean, there's one guy that does that really well, and anybody else that does it, it kind of sounds cheesy, but it's fun, for me to do here by myself or whatever. But yeah, you can go so many directions with that stuff, and that's part of the fun too. I mean, I've always, for as much as this is like a solo thing, I've always valued and appreciated, or at least I've understood the difference between like a solo project where you kind of direct everything or do everything yourself, and a band project. There's a reason bands sound like a band, because all of those people contribute something, whether they're actually writing or arranging the songs or not, whether they're performing these songs or whatever their role is. There's some level of contribution that wouldn't be there if that individual wasn't a part of it.
The cohesion is a massive part of the sound.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain bands that when they lose members, the band, they may continue, but it's not the same band.
Yeah.
We have a million examples of that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think kind of what the strength here too is, you don't necessarily get painted into that box either. But what is kind of cool is music of this ilk is having a real moment. In general, there is like a massive wave of post-punk and shoegaze and like just like post-grunge and alt-rock that was like, it could have existed 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It could have just happened 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
It's having a real underground moment that's very special and very important. That's probably what saw you into alt press to begin with.
Yeah.
It's still happening.
Yeah.
And the thing is, just because this song didn't catch today doesn't mean it won't catch tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it just so happens a ton of the people who are into this stuff that we're talking about are into this show, because this show really caters to them, like subconsciously.
Yeah.
It just so happens that my tastes kind of ride that divide.
That's cool.
It's fun for me, because I'm like, I'm almost like, I could be my son's grandfather. That's how old I am. You know what I mean?
But I think from what I've listened to and watched and everything, like, I think you come about this from a really genuine place, and I think that's what people appreciate. That's what I appreciate about what you do. Like, you're not out here trying to just like we're 5 minutes ago we're talking about the Sleeplore songs. You're not trying to cater to a particular audience. You're doing what you love, talking about what you love, and you span different genres, types of people, and everything else. But it all comes from a place of like you being genuine, finding what you appreciate about it, and speaking in a way that is just natural and comfortable. It's like, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling.
That's why I don't have artists, authors, musicians, what have you, on here that I don't genuinely have a distinct love for. If I just like something a little bit,
Yeah.
what am I gonna talk to you about, man?
Yeah. That's
Like,
hard.
it's difficult. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not a very good bullshit artist.
Yeah.
That's it's a weakness on my part, I think.
It's
But
exhausting to be though.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's no fun.
It's
And like I wouldn't. I've been bugging you to come on since I've had a podcast, right?
yeah.
2
That's
years.
true.
2
That's
years.
true. I'm glad we're doing it, man.
I
This is
am
great.
I am too. And especially like had you come on back then, like you had some stuff out. Now, like there's a respectable discography we're working with right now.
Yeah.
And to kind of like get to ride that wave just from like somebody who's I've known your music precursor to this and like having seen you play in the Scranton area for however long, like a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a fun ride to watch you kind of do all of this. And
Cool.
like you were a young guy the first time I saw you play on stage. I think you were in high school.
Yeah. I mean, I've been playing music a long time. So a lot of people from this area that I guess would know me probably from 2 or 3 bands. I mean, I played in this band that was still have mixed feelings about. I love the guys and I love what we created initially, but it was a band called Ourafter.
Yep.
We did a record together. The way that I came about that was I was working as an engineer at a studio. The band was in the studio, and it was sort of like almost like it wasn't a full band thing. It wasn't quite a solo thing, but it was very few people involved, and it grew into a bigger thing. And I was working there as an assistant engineer, as young buck or whatever, just learning the trade sort of. And the main engineer that was there, great engineer, really great guy, and the owner, like they didn't really offer a lot of creative input to artists. I think they quite honestly were afraid to. And I think it was the owner that even said to me at one point when I asked him about that, I'm like, why don't you produce bands? Why don't you actually like offer input? And he's like, well, Clyde, we're of the mindset that if we offer our opinion to a band and creatively and they don't like it and they come back 6 months later and say, we don't like this, we want you to redo it or whatever, we're not in that business or whatever. And that really struck me wrong. Like I'm like, why are they coming here? Like, are you just here literally to push the button and that's it? Because you are imparting your sound on this record, whether you believe it or not. It's like Steve Albini. It's like, I don't produce records. It's like, well, you impart your sound. Like, you can't deny that, like
from Nirvana to Failure to like Neurosis. He has had
Yeah.
his hands in every fucking
You
awesome
can
band
tell it's Steve Albini,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love his stuff,
Of course.
It doesn't work for everything, but it's his sound, So I was involved in that project and I started speaking up. And many of the projects I was involved with during that time, I spoke up and people appreciated that. They were looking for that. They were looking for that outside perspective, And at one point, the singer of that band, John Phillips, who's now like the tour manager for like Snoop Dogg and Body Count and all this stuff.
Yep.
He pulled me aside outside this bar, Corkscrews, when he was playing the one night, and he's like, "Hey, how do you feel about being the 5th member of the band?" And I'm like, "Whoa, that's cool," And I was like, "Yeah, super happy. This is cool," But that first record we did was really interesting, and we had a guy producing it that was, he came from like, I don't know, this synth industrial scene and everything else, and like, so some of the sounds,
I know him.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So he was into is into some really interesting and dark kind of stuff, and like some of those sounds were just really cool, and that influence on there. I think it was the fact that like we were trying to break things, to me, that was interesting about that record.
Yeah.
Now he left that project because we went on tour and we did the live thing, and we're traveling across the at least the eastern part of the country and everything. He wanted nothing to do with that. He was like a total recluse and everything else, and just wanted nothing to do with it. So we got another bass player to go out, and that was cool. But we started working on new material, and it was like it was going in a direction I just did not want to go in. So we ended up constantly butting heads and everything else, and it kind of came to the point where we had to have this conversation, and they're like, well, we don't think this is really working out anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so, because I don't want to be Breaking Benjamin, and you guys do.
Yeah,
so
and that's what worked about the first record and made it like really popped to me was you weren't pandering to that shit.
Yeah,
It was like
exactly.
there was like 3 or 4 bands in this area that were like everything to everybody, and I couldn't stand any of them. I hate Breaking
Yeah.
Benjamin. I and like listen, I have friends who are in the band Lifer.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Fucking hate that band.
I know. Me
I
too.
hate that
Me
band.
too.
I hate that shit.
Yeah.
There's just something really disingenuous about that style of music. But what you guys
Yeah.
were doing was more in line with where my heart was at, which
Yeah.
was like everything we've talked about, from
We.
the Cure to the Pixies,
Yeah.
to like it was all kind of there,
Right.
you
We were
know?
listening to, like, when we were making the record, that first record, we were listening to The Cure, Depeche Mode,
Yeah.
Sponge at the time, and like, a whole bunch of different stuff.
Yeah,
But
Sponge Wax Ecstatic is a great
right.
record, man.
It actually is. Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of stuff in that era that was really good. Now that you look back on it now, and it's like, oh, I wish I was into it, but at least you could rediscover it. Like I wasn't. There's so much stuff from like the 90s and 2000s that I kind of poo-pooed. Even Radiohead.
Sure.
When Radiohead was big, I was like, oh, they're big. I probably shouldn't like them.
Yeah.
But then in Rainbows came out, I think it was, and I was like, holy shit,
Yep.
this is wild.
And
Like
they
mixing the
don't care.
electronic and the live stuff, and oh man,
Yep.
so went down that hole and never came back out. But so people, yeah, long story short, people might know me from that band, or the Collective, which is like an R&B and hip hop group that I
Yeah.
played with, and really popular group, one of the top cover bands actually in the East Coast, and the only real cover band I ever played in, except for like some blues projects and stuff, which were just for fun. And then, prior to that, going back, there was this band called the Magdalyns.
Yeah.
That, that was much more in line with like my heart and soul.
Yeah.
And probably, even though the music's way different, it's much closer to the Sleeplore stuff than any of those other projects in many ways, because it was so much more guttural and just kind of came from the heart. So, and that was, man, that was a lot of fun.
And there was a lot of Johnny Marr worship in the Magdalens.
Yeah.
I think I heard a lot of it anyway in the guitar playing, but I'm a Smiths freak.
Yeah.
Having grown up when I did, having discovered the Smiths when I did, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, listening to college radio.
Wow.
And
yeah,
it absorbs you. But you never gotten, even the Collective, I know like 80% of the guys in the Collective, like the drummer of my band was once the drummer of the Collective, and he's a hardcore kid.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of people like that just kind of got involved with that. Kermit was a cool dude. Like he was in that for a while. Like I know all those guys.
Yeah.
They make good stuff, even though it's a cover band, but it's a good nest of artists.
Yeah.
That's accepting all of the new metal weirdness that occurred in this area. There's a lot of really wonderful, really eclectic artists.
There are.
That always have been and always will be in the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area.
Yeah.
I remember the like mid to late 80s, like being in junior high school and going to like the punk shows, and we would have like these hippie bands playing with the hardcore bands.
Yeah.
And it was always okay.
Yeah.
It was always way okay. And we would get into each other's bands, and we would end up hanging out, and like there'd be a great cross section of bands that kind of like meshed the two.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Me too.
I loved growing up here and having all of that happening. And you're obviously a product of all of this.
Oh yeah.
Of all of the things that kind of occur here. And people don't realize, except for like some glaring exceptions that got to get really big out of this area.
Yeah.
People don't know how good we have it in our music scene.
Yeah.
Do you ever wish you'd kind of just gotten out 15 years ago?
I mean, I don't know, man. I think about that. I think about like the other thing is like, my music life is obviously it's my life. It's a large part of who I am and everything. But I feel like, we talk about age and everything. I feel like I have lived many lifetimes. It's so bizarre. Like I can distinctly remember, and I for some reason I was driving yesterday or today at some point, and I had this exact thought, and it happens a lot. But I can distinctly remember periods in my life where I was doing very different things. Like that time when I was in the Magdalyns was such a distinct period in my life. The time when I was in the Collective, the time I was an Hourafter, my working life, outside of my music life, there are distinct periods I remember, and I've been all over the country. I've, gone all over the place. Like I've been extremely fortunate to just do all the things that, that I've done in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, it's like, do I wish I had gotten out or gone somewhere different or done something different? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have had opportunities, even recently in my life to do that and to go
Yeah.
do that, and for many different outlets. And it's like, I don't know. One part of me, knows and is aware just from going to a lot of different places that, like, people in different places, everyone thinks that where they're at or where they grew up is a shithole,
Yeah.
and they wish they got out or whatever the case is. It's everywhere. So people say that, like, I see people, whether it's if I log into Facebook, which is, a black hole I hate to log into, or
Yep.
if just seeing people out or whatever, it's like, oh, this place sucks or whatever. It's like, no, I think it's not bad. There's a lot of things to offer here. You have to go out and do them, and you actually have to, like, interact with people, or, maybe participate or maybe contribute to society every once in a while. Like, go volunteer somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, how fulfilling is that shit? Um, so, like, there's a lot to offer here. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, it would have been cool to, like, I don't know, move to LA for a couple of years, or, Nashville or somewhere like that. But at the same time, like, so many friends I have that have done that, and like a really good friend of mine, John Kyle, who just played drums on Just Fine, and some of the other stuff that'll be coming out. Like, he was living out on the West Coast for the last, like, 15 plus years or whatever. I think he was in Washington and then in LA area for a long time, doing stagehand work for huge shows, everything else, like, as big as it gets.
Yep.
And he ended up coming back here during the pandemic, and like, just from talking to him, I don't think he left just because he was, jaded on the work or whatever, but like, or the people, but like, you just talk to so many people who have done that and lived there, and it's like, LA specifically, it's like, so many of the people are just so fake, and
Yeah.
like, people go out there to be fake, and it's like, I'm not into that at all. Nashville, man, like, I think I'm a decent guitarist. I'm not as good as I was. If I ever practiced, I might be a little bit better, but I don't. I'll just pick up the guitar and play, like, fairly often. But like, you go down to Nashville, and like, you bump into somebody who's like this world-class musician, and they blow your mind, and then the next person you bump into is even better than them, and
Yeah.
it's like, it just continues down that path, and it's like, wow, if I came down here, like, what would I be and what would I even do? Like, it's just so full of talent.
One of
Crazy.
my oldest friends, Bob Lewis, is still down there.
Yeah.
Still, Bob.
Oh yeah.
He's still writing. He's still doing it. And Bob's
And
like,
he's so talented,
he's
but
talented as hell, but he's not a guitar virtuoso.
right.
He's a songwriter.
Mhm.
And he's like, every time I interview a band from Nashville, they're like, "You're friends with Bob Lewis."
Yeah, that's
Yes,
awesome.
yes, I am.
He's a
Bob,
sweetheart.
he's a sweet guy. He gets around. He was in like one of the most important punk bands from this area ever, Bedford.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, that's not the kind of place where like most people are going to get noticed.
Yeah, I know.
Because everybody is kind of part of a machine there. Okay. Same thing with LA. I moved to New York in the 90s to early 90s to go to college, and
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be in a huge hardcore band and everything was going to be wonderful, and I came back 3 years later and things were far less than wonderful.
Yeah.
Because places like that eat you alive
Yeah.
one way or another. At least here we get to have a very insular artistic bubble where people are not trying to be better than one another. We're trying to not quite be like one another.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. And that's
Yeah.
what I always loved about being from here, is because like, you could go to any kind of show, a punk show, and any kind of alt rock show, whatever it is. If someone's playing a song that sounds like another band, no one's going to stand for it, A, because there's so few of us. B,
Yeah.
no one wants to be in the derivative band.
Right.
So they're going to self-check even before anyone else gets to hear it. That's the cool part about being in a rarefied position in a small town.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, there's pros and cons to
Right.
all of the above scenario, right? But like, at least, I guess not at least, I was going to say at least here, but I think anywhere, it's much like I guess for me, living the world of audio engineering and production, there's so many ads out there for new products and things like that, and all the seasoned pros, they'll just say, learn what you have.
Yeah.
And make the most of it. Like, don't buy 10 new plugins for your recording system to make you sound better because you think it's going to be this great thing because so and so used it. Just learn what you have really well.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing goes for your, whether it's your music scene, your local area, geography, whatever it is, like, learn it really well. And, learn how to network, learn how to like talk to people, find people, whatever the case may be. And you can make a lot out of it. And especially now, like, the playing field has been so much more leveled, especially the last 2-3 years, with COVID, everything being forced to go virtual and everything else. It's like, it really, in many ways, doesn't matter where you are. And like, for me, like with the Sleeplore project itself, being that I never wanted to perform live with that project, although I will continue to occasionally, it's not like I'm looking to play every night. So if I was looking to play every night, then yeah, it's probably a problem to live here because I'd be driving all over the place to go play, but I'm not. Yeah. So for me, it's like all that I need is here for the most part, So.
And it's not like 25, 30 years ago. Well, it's over 30 years ago when I started playing in bands, seriously.
Yeah.
And we had to make flyers at Staples or steal them from a grocery store, and then go to the Wyoming Valley Mall or the Viewmont Mall and hand out flyers to people who look like they may be a little, in our ilk, and pass them out and try and network that way. You don't have to do that kind of shit now. They will come to you. All you have to do is advertise, like, hey, I have this A, B, and C, and here it is, come get it. It's people will bemoan that in my age group, like, oh, they have it so easy now. Good. That shit sucked.
It did. I mean, the good thing is, like, people have never had greater access to be able to make music and share their music than ever before. So that's a good thing. And I am all for, like, I have a small recording studio, and people do reach out all the time to work on projects and stuff. And these days, in large part, I'm turning many of them down just because it's a lot. I have a lot going on, but I am all for helping people set up their own rig and do their own thing in a healthy way. Don't go out there, buy a laptop and get like Fruity Loops and say that you're like the best producer in the world, because that's a total bullshit. But like, let's make music. Anyone can make music anywhere, and they, people have greater access to it. Now, the downside to all that is there's so much more music in front of people, and people are like just getting, pulverized with so much content and music, and I get burnt out on it. I mean, social media sucks. It's the worst. And at the same time, it's, for many people, it's the best, so it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I can't keep up with it personally. And like, I try to put some stuff out there here and there, and I'll go through spurts, especially if I'm putting something out where I'll like just try to build up a little bit of activity or whatever, just to warm up the algorithms or whatever it is you're supposed to do, but it's a lot, it's a lot of work. And I find that draining, to be honest.
It is, because it's not real, it's not authentic or organic.
Yeah.
And I watch my kids play with the internet and things like that, and it's so second nature to them. To me, it's taxing. I feel a part of me like not die, but certainly atrophy every time I kind of get in there, because I wasn't raised on that. I wasn't. It wasn't a part of my life until I was in my 20s, because it didn't exist.
Yeah,
it just simply didn't exist. But amongst the bombardment of social media and all of that and new music, has there been anything new musically that has resonated with you?
There's a lot of stuff out there, I feel like. I mean, to talk about more popular stuff or whatever, you mentioned Tom York, Radiohead before, The Smile. Some of that stuff's really good. I was actually just listening to, I think it was Free in the Knowledge earlier, and there's some stuff on that record. Like, I've honestly only listened to it, I think, once all the way through, twice possibly, but there are distinct moments on there where I was like, wow, it's different than Radiohead, but it has similar appeal. But there are some deep moments on there that I really connected to, that I definitely, will go back and, pick that up. Like somehow that Free in the Knowledge ended up in my head today. And I'm like, I need to listen to that. I'm just feeling that right now,
Yeah.
And sometimes you connect with those things. I discover, honestly, like, I'll just discover stuff on social media that I'll go through. I mean, there are definitely some bands. There's this woman, Tamar Barrick. Like I think she was on Kill Rock Stars Records at one point, something like that. But we connected on there. I've tried to get her actually on some of my stuff, but she's just like, oh, it's great, but I'm busy or whatever. But but like, she's had some stuff that she's put out. She had this one song, man, that I cannot get enough of. I shared it at some point. I'll have to send it to you, but like, it's incredible. It's so good. And like, she did this, really raw video of herself playing it with someone else, I think, just on the acoustic guitar or whatever. And I'm like, man, this is so good. Like, this is the kind of stuff I should be doing or whatever, So you come across stuff like that. So like when the Sleeplore stuff started picking up a little bit and people were like, oh, it sounds like this, or it sounds like that, or all of a sudden somebody says, oh, this is one of the greatest emo projects or whatever that, you should. I'm like, I never like that word. Sorry, but I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. Let me just sit back and see what happens here, But I was never into that. For me, emo, I always remember liking the music, but hating the singing. Like,
unless it's like proto emo, like the original stuff, like Lifetime and Fugazi and stuff like that.
Which I haven't even considered that emo. But
no, I don't either. But it's important to that genre of hardcore. To me, like, no, you're not emo. You're maybe indie rock to a degree. I think you fit more in with like the more intellectual post-punk, because you like a lot of that stuff that I like The Cure and Depeche Mode and Bauhaus, even maybe a little bit. Joy Division, like the stuff that came from punk but had the self-awareness and the intellect to reach for something that was more resonant with the human spirit. That's, even the Smashing Pumpkins did that. Even New Order did that. There were so many like great examples of bands in the 80s and 90s that just, they didn't adhere to this, that, or the other. They just did what they did, and it maybe fell in line with something that pre-existed them. But they're the best. The best bands don't pander. The best bands don't pander. They just do what they do, and you'll see the people who gravitate toward them are the same people who are into all the really cool other shit. So they get lumped in with it. Like when I said Sleeplore was really resonating and fitting in with me with a lot of this new wave of post-punk stuff, because none of it sounds the same. It's just, it's cool stuff that has punk undertones that still comes from a similar place but doesn't sound alike.
I mean, I agree with that. And I it's funny because I knew you're like a punk hardcore guy, and so I'm thinking about coming on here, and I'm like, man, he's gonna ask me about what punk music or whatever I'm into, and I'm like, it's funny, like I've listened to so much music, and grew up on a lot of weird stuff, but never super big into punk music, except I did get really into Greg Sage and the Wipers, or the Wipers, for a while.
The Wipers are just, they're sublime. There's something about the Wipers that is expansive and doesn't mince words with its audience. It just, the Wipers were exactly who they were. It was so much fun to fucking listen to.
I have so much, like, when I go back and listen to that Is This Real record, it's so nostalgic. And it's one of those records that puts me in a place and time. And I mean, there are definitely a handful of records for me that do that. I think probably everybody has that, whether they realize it or not. But it's funny, like, I've shared that record with friends of mine who say that they're into punk music, or that they're into like whatever, and they're like they don't even give it a chance. It's like, what am I missing? To me, like, that's kind of where this stuff feels like it comes from. I don't know.
It does. The Wipers, that's quintessential punk.
Right.
That is like ground zero stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like the Clash and you don't like the Wipers, if you like the Sex Pistols and Public Image Limited and don't like the
Right.
Wipers, you weren't paying enough attention.
Yeah.
You
I
just
agree.
weren't. You just weren't.
Yeah.
There's this codification that comes with people who align themselves with scenes of music or styles of music where they miss the things that have nuance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that makes me sad because like I remember coming into the punk and hardcore thing and wearing like Nine Inch Nails t-shirts or
Yep.
my Rolling Stones Goat's Head Soup t-shirt and people being
Mhm.
like, dude, that's not punk. I'm like, well, yeah, brother, it is. You just haven't figured it the fuck out yet.
Right. Right.
The Velvet Underground are very much a
Oh,
punk
yeah.
band. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Iggy and the
Yeah.
Stooges are a punk band.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the Stones are like the blueprint.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that's spot on. And that's probably more, where I come from. I
Yeah.
mean, you talk about like, early influential records for me. Like I had, another fortunate thing, that happened in my life is I ended up, I guess, so to speak, inheriting. My uncle's still alive, but I inherited a bunch of his records
Yeah.
when he moved out at some point. And, I remember going to my grandfather's and, digging through the records. And I had a friend of mine with me at the time because I didn't know who any of these bands were. And I didn't grow up in a musical household, but he did. So he came with me to like look through the records and I grabbed like as many as I could, basically, because it was all going to go to the dump. And Velvet Underground were like, I had like at least 6 records from the Velvet Underground, some live stuff, some rare stuff. There was that. There was Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow.
Yeah.
Was one of those records, and that became a huge influence for me.
Sure.
So like a lot of guitar stuff that I do, like I do these weird things sometimes, these weird in between like passing tone bends and stuff. I'm like, where does that even come from? It's so weird.
Jeff Beck, he was very inventive and fearless with his approach to he almost approached the guitar like it wasn't ever played the same way before or since. I love that. I dig that.
Yeah.
There's something like that just it bites me the same way. Like I'm a big jazz freak.
Yeah,
Like
cool.
massive jazz freak. Miles Davis kind of blue is like where people that's entry level shit, right?
Yeah.
But there's something about that, the idea of something like that, where all of these future greats like Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley are all involved on a record. And he didn't lay out sheet music for them. He didn't lay out anything. It was modal jazz. He said, we're playing this key in this time signature. Record, go.
Yeah.
And it's brilliance from stem to stern. It's only a Miles Davis record because he put them all together. Nothing.
Exactly.
That's punk rock.
Yeah. And that's what's, the other common thread is it goes back to what I was saying before, like the difference of like if Miles Davis were here today with Pro Tools tracking all those parts or whatever versus putting a band together and allowing everyone to contribute to make that sound.
Yeah.
And it's to your point, selecting the people who were involved with it to sort of curate that sound. That's what made the record.
Yeah. And you can do that with one guy in Pro Tools. You can do that with 16 guys in a hall.
Yeah.
And one microphone. It's all in the intention.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like, and like that's where I'm kind of like trying to circle back to with you with intention. Like for you to say, okay, I'm going to tailor this to this crowd, you're going to lose Sleeplore.
Yeah.
You are. You're going to lose it. And I know you'll never do it because you haven't done it yet.
Yeah. No, that's a really great point.
And you like it's too much fun for me to listen and watch to see what you do next to do that to yourself. And I really never thought you would anyway.
Yeah. I've got, it's the exciting thing is though, like I've got like pockets full or I guess I could say literal folders, full of music that are like, different sounds. Like I've got a whole bunch of and I'm really excited at some point to do is like, I don't know, like stoner rock kind of stuff. This really good. Really good.
Yeah, and, I love that kind of stuff. Caius is one of my all-time favorite bands. Like,
yep. It's just like no bullshit. I want to get, I've got a couple drummers in mind, but like I want to get a drummer, a bass player, me, and maybe somebody else to do some weird shit on it too. But like stripped down, no bullshit, just kind of like, and that'll be, I'd like to approach that more like a Caius record or early Queens or something like that, where it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, we're not, it's just going to be like one thing. It's like almost like a Desert Sessions thing. Let's come together
Yeah.
and just do it,
I remember when the first desert sessions came out, and like, having been like a big Caius fan, and then Caius broke up, but Fu Manchu was around, and Queens had first come out with that first self-titled
Yeah.
record, and they were like hanging out with oh God, Fatso Jetson and all those bands. It was so much fun to like look at this like mixed bag of really crazy like punk and metal musicians that were all friends from that same place,
Yeah.
and just wing it on stage. Fucking
Yeah.
I miss that spirit. It's
Yeah.
cool that they're still doing that, even though inarguably there's something really wrong with Homeboy from Queens of the Stone Age right now. He's in a dark place, but
there's some weird shit going on there. I mean, I don't know. I have to think that like, you get so famous and you get so much shit in your face for, whatever, like handouts and people worshiping you and everything else. It just goes to your head. Like something has to happen there,
Yeah.
But yeah, the first couple records are really good, and there's still something there, but there's something in addition to that there too, pulling in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, but like we can't argue that he's not gifted.
Totally.
You just can't.
Yeah.
I am not one of those people who have a really great time separating the artist from the art.
Yeah.
If I know somebody's a scumbag, it's really hard for me to like what they're still doing, but I'll be damned if Brand New doesn't still just move me in a very specific way, even though I know that guy's a dick. Jesse Lacey. You know what I mean? Like he really did create some amazing music.
Yeah.
It's hard, and that's a hallmark of this time period.
Yeah.
Because like, there are so many people who care about it now and are vocal about it, and it is kind of like it's the norm for people to take artists to task for their bad behavior. It's not like when the Stones were at their height and they're writing songs about like jailbait.
Right.
And I love Brown Sugar.
I know.
But it's racist, and it's almost pedophilic. I mean, no, it's not almost. It's pedophilic. I mean, sold in
but most people that listen to it don't even realize that. That's the thing. It's so bizarre.
I think you could forgive it for time periods, but if it's happening now, you kind of can't.
Yeah. Yep. It's, well, I mean, I think some people would argue it's like, it like with a small child, they go off and do something that's wrong, but if they've never been talked to about it before or whatever, it's like, well, okay, well, kind of, I guess, felt wrong, but I did it and pushed the boundaries, like as a society, we hadn't talked about a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, for forever,
And that's what it is. Like whenever I talk to authors and I talk about H.P. Lovecraft, I mean, he was writing like crazy cosmic horror, but it was all about his racism, right?
Yeah.
But he wrote it in a time period where racism was pretty okay.
Yeah. Right.
So like, was it wrong? Of course.
Yeah.
Was it? It wasn't written now. It's not like the social consciousness that we share now was not prevalent or even thought of then.
Yeah.
So
different time.
It's you get yourself into a quagmire. Thankfully, that doesn't apply to you or I.
Absolutely.
But when talking about this kind of thing, it does kind of lead me into the conceit of the only question that I have pre-prepared for every artist on this podcast.
Yeah.
And that is, if you pay attention to my show, what is it that terrifies you on an existential level?
Yeah. So I feel like for most people, that one, they're going to talk about death,
right?
Or dying in general, or losing loved ones, that kind of stuff. And that's, I mean, I think I think about that stuff enough. So it's, I think that's one commonality across probably all of us. And, we think about that kind of thing. But for me, outside of that, I think there's one thing that I do get hung up on occasionally, or periodically, I guess. And that particular thing is, and this is going to sound like, and it's not. This isn't me trying to be like an an intentional optimist or anything like that, but it's just the way that I operate, and I goes back to the what I said earlier about doing a lot of different things in my life and having different periods or whatever. But I fear not being able to do all of the things that I want to do in life.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that like I want to accomplish things. Like I don't want to have a building named after me or something like it's not that type of thing. It's like I don't know. Like I don't and I have pursued trying to figure out what this is, but there's something about me personally that is like I am a seeker. I am I'm always in pursuit of something. And I don't know if it's I think there is a term that may apply to this, but I may be applying it wrong. But the term of romantic, right?
Yeah.
So like and it doesn't necessarily have to do with like a romantic relationship with my wife necessarily, but it's like a romantic of life, right?
Yeah.
Like I just love so many different things, like I re-fell in love with mountain biking the last couple of years, just getting out with a couple buddies in the woods or whatever, getting banged up and whatever, like exerting yourself, but like just being outside, like and there's a lot of really great people in that circle, and it's like my friend Dave calls it the I don't know, the great neutralizer or something like that, where it's just like you bring all these people together from different right-wing people, left-wing people from different backgrounds, and you hop on a bike and it's like that all kind of goes away.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen necessarily everywhere, but that's one of those things. Like I've really been obsessing over that the last couple of years. I love making music, and I fear other parts of my life like not getting in the way of that, but it's like you only have so much time.
Yeah.
And life is finite. We only have so much time in this earth. And one of the really cool things that I'll just say learned, I guess, the past several months, or come to the realization of, or at least like acknowledged, and I'm trying to keep in mind for myself, is that because life is finite, and everything that we do is finite, if you take every moment of your day as a finite moment, and even as an example, the things that bring you the most pain, like I have a 5-year-old daughter, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a pain necessarily, but like a great example of a finite thing that you may not think about in the moment is like, so she's 5 now. She's getting bigger physically, and like every 5 minutes she's asking me to pick her up. She loves me. Like we've got this great relationship and everything. And I love her obviously. But like, she's like, dad, pick me up, and I'm like, oh man, my back hurts or whatever. It's like, but you have to have that thought in that moment of, this could be the last time that she ever asks me to pick her up, or this could be the last time that like, whatever that thing is that's causing you pain in that moment in your regular day life or whatever, it could be the last time that happens or whatever. So just take a moment, pause on it, and realize that's could be the last time, and it makes it a little more palatable,
And I think people need to understand too, like we have kids of a similar age, and I'm 47 almost, and my son's 4. My daughter's 23, but my son's 4. I think about that all the time. Maybe because I am aging, or I've aged a bit past where most of my listeners are, where my wife will criticize me, or like friends, like, why are you still carrying him around? He's 4. Because, dude, I'm not ever going to be a dad again.
Right.
This is it. This is the last hurrah.
Right.
And I'm never going to have a baby again. I'm never going to have the opportunity to have another being love me quite as much as this one does. That's a big fucking deal, man.
Oh yeah. That's right.
At any age. I don't care if you're 18 and you have a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
This could be it. This could be the last time. Do it right. Love fully and correctly, and mindfully.
Yeah. And that could apply to so many things. It's like, I for I don't know, several years in like high school and college, I worked in restaurants. I made pizza like at one point, so like I didn't necessarily hate it. I actually miss it sometimes. But let's say you're making pizza right now, listening to this or whatever, and you're like, I fucking hate making pizza. My life sucks. I hate this. It's like, well, just pause for a second. What if this is the last pizza that you ever make because the place is going to close tomorrow and you're never going to make pizza again?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that change the way you feel about it?
Yeah. Yeah, because like you're going to savor it. It's going to be
Yeah.
all the sweeter. Just like the workaday work week can be very daunting to many people, myself included.
Totally.
What if you don't have the ability to do this anymore?
Right.
You're going to savor it.
Yeah. If you knew that tomorrow, whether you're going to die or something's going to physically change where you can't do those things, you get sick, whatever the case is. I mean, that's the obvious one. Like, you're going to live your life different, But the harder ones, I think, conceptualize or whatever, is that the finite nature of the things that you do, like just like the example I used earlier that you used, picking up your kid.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this kid's 40 pounds now. It's it's not as easy as it once was or whatever, but that may be the last time they ask you to do that.
Yeah.
So do it.
Yeah. That kid's not going to think you're cool
Right.
forever.
Exactly.
Forever.
Dad.
Ask my 23-year-old. If I tried to pick her up, she'd probably slap me.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's going to be a point where it's not going to be acceptable for you to be as affectionate, or not acceptable for you to be whatever it is you're doing. Like, you're going to reach a point where it's just not cool.
Yeah. I'm already seeing with my daughter. It's like even little glimpses of it. I'm like, oh no, already, not ready for this.
Little boys are easier. Little girls are, I don't want to scare you, man, but little girls come with their own, little boys do too, but little girls come with their own baggage.
Oh man.
And the good news for you as dad, you're always going to be the coolest guy ever. That's little awesome. Boys, I'm losing him rapidly to his mom.
Yeah.
Like, very rapidly.
Well, that's the nature, right? Like girls fall in love with their dad, boys fall in love with their mom, kind of thing, and eventually that's gonna like pull you in different directions or whatever. But
here's something really cool. Having children a year apart, having gone through the pandemic recently with them being so small, at least I got to be off for the better part of a year with my little kid, and just being fully engaged. I didn't have to get up and go anywhere, do anything. It was just, I was fucking ultra present.
Wow.
In a way that I never got to be with my daughter, because shit, there was no pandemic. There was none of that. I mean, sadly, right when she was a very small child, like a baby, 9/11 happened and things got weird, but we didn't shut the world down.
Right. Yeah.
This was just like everything went on pause except for my family. Yeah. What a moment.
I know. You know what, man? Like, I was so glad to, in that moment, have that presence of mind to say, there's a silver lining here. There are things to appreciate and make the most of it, because it's not always going to be this way. Like, for me, a large part of that was, running the studio. I had bands in every single day, pretty much, like 7 days a week prior to the pandemic happening, and I actually never wanted to do that. I only wanted to record a handful of bands every year, basically work really deep on those projects and make really great music, And what ended up happening was, like, I wasn't charging a ton of money and I was getting a good product and people liked working with me. They liked the gear I have, whatever it is, and, so people are constantly pounding the door down. So then I'm just booking all kinds of sessions and everything. And, it's all good because I had a lot of fun, but all of a sudden, I stopped doing that, and I was only taking on remote work, which kept me very busy for quite a while doing session work. But then it got to the point where I was like, let's dig up some of the old stuff that you wrote, Clyde, and do something with that. And that's how Sleeplore came out, so that's a silver lining, and really thankful for that. And but just to have that presence of mind of like, being home with a young child and, not being on the road or anything like that for a while is like, that's a time that we will never forget,
Yeah.
you know?
I got so much positivity out of the pandemic. Like, I feel guilty sometimes because I got that time with my small child, my wife, and then my wife said, you're puttering around the house. You need to do something. I know you're not going to play in the band right now, but why don't you do a podcast? You were a journalist for
Yeah.
20 some years. Just
Yeah.
do a podcast. This is her idea. This isn't mine.
Wow. That's cool.
Her brainchild. Go run with it. And boom, here we
There you
are.
are. That's
But
awesome.
it got to like the both of us kind of got to have experienced like such greatness out of such a terrible
Yeah.
period of time. Like your child was born in the midst of it, right?
Oh yeah. Pretty much. I mean, she was like a year old. Like I think her second birthday was definitely during the pandemic, So like she didn't really have a birthday party or anything like that. And
Yeah.
third birthday and everything. So like it was really weird, and having a small child not being able to have that social,
She talked
and
late, didn't she?
no, you know what?
Oh,
Like
good.
she didn't talk late, and there's a lot I think. So I think, thankfully, I think it happened at, not that it's a good time, but it happened at a better time probably for her because
Yeah.
she was of sound enough mind or whatever, developed mind that she picked up a lot from us.
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, she's actually in some ways a little advanced in terms of, her intellect and everything.
Yeah.
In other ways, coming out of it from a social standpoint, definitely behind,
Yeah. Kanan, my
Um,
son, was behind, but he learned to read well before he should have. Like his
yeah,
dad, I learned to read really quickly,
that's
really
cool.
young, but uh, he didn't talk, but for different reasons. He
Yeah.
had an ear issue that we didn't know about because the doctors
Yeah.
didn't pick it up. But
Oh,
there are so many kids out there that spoke late that didn't develop correctly because children learn from social situations, not just from mom and
yes.
dad.
Yeah.
I think again, you and I kind of lucked out.
I agree, man. I agree. You know?
But kind of coming out of the pandemic of it all, because that's like the topic of everything right now.
Yeah.
What is the next song, the next EP? What does that look like for you now, Clyde?
Yeah. Still trying to figure a lot of that out,
Yeah,
I've got so many, one-offs still, old stuff and newer stuff that I really would love to put out. A couple of them are grouped. Like I've got a batch of songs I mentioned were sort of the stoner rock thing that I have to do because they're really good and they might in some ways be better than anything I put out under this moniker so far. But so I really need to do that. Um, I've got some older stuff too that's like, a couple of them are a lot more, I don't know, like pure indie kind of sound, and there's some electronic stuff, and so much different stuff. So like I have to wade through a lot of that and decide, do I want to do a collection of similar sounding things or whatever? But at the same time, I'm like, I just want to write new stuff
yeah,
and just keep just putting stuff out. So right now, I absolutely know I have two more songs. From the similar era to this Just Fine song, which was like just a year ago, so it's
yeah.
recent stuff that I wrote for Sleeplore, um, that I want to put out. One of them is is completely unreleased. Nobody's heard, and it's it was written on the acoustic guitar, and it's got that backing to it, but I've like rewritten it and recorded it so many times now. The latest version of it sounds like it came off of In Rainbows. So it's like a totally different thing where like I got rid of the acoustic guitar. I've got these muted sounding electric guitars playing these weird melodies and like some dry drums. And I'm like, this is also great, So,
Yeah,
trying to feel those out. At one point, I had this guy from a label down in Austin that wanted to do some like some short runs for me and press some vinyl. And I thought there were three songs. These were the three songs actually I was going to do like, a short run of vinyl on each one. So I may still do something like that. Just do like stripped down acoustic versions or something. I think that would be really cool. but definitely going to be releasing this one called Broken Arrow that I had Steve Martin play on, actually, who played drums with University Drive and
Yeah,
a whole bunch of other stuff, but really good dude. So that one will be coming out. I'd like that to be the next one, but I have another one that I'm actually a lot more excited about than I was talking about earlier, that it's coming together like really, really well. And I kind of just want to put something out relatively soon. So we'll see what happens between those two, because I'm struggling with the Broken Arrow one a little bit directionally, just like, I don't know, as you do, like when you have infinite possibilities in front of you
yeah.
and it's endless, it takes time sometimes. So sometimes I just need to, like, and that's when it goes back to deciding on a direction sometimes can be easier to just get stuff done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's easier, it's easier to get stuff done. Or the other part of it is like, just restrict yourself. I've got a tape deck in the
Ooh,
back,
yeah,
So
that's
what I
the
may do
biggest.
with that stoner rock stuff, what I may do is just be like, guys, come on in for, the week or whatever. I'm going to pull out the tape deck and that's it. We're limiting ourselves to whatever we can get out of this thing, and I'll use the analog gear and that's it, like, because then it'll get done and that's it.
Limitations, in my opinion, are truly they're the greatest inspiration, because if you look at every band that, like, this was all we knew how to do, or this was all the equipment we had at our disposal, like the Jimi Hendrix Experience, recorded on fucking 4 tracks
Right.
exclusively until Electric Ladyland was built. But man, the first two were just four tracks in a room.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Limitations can bring about a fruit that I think no other situation really can for an artist. Man, that might be the move. I mean, like I said, not to force your hand, but
I know.
like the move.
But it's at the very least for like a particular batch of songs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fun thing to do. I haven't done it in a long time, so it'll be fun to dust off that skill set and everything, and just kind of force myself to do it, because nobody wants to pay for tape these days, so nobody's recording that way that I work with today, so be fun to just kind of go down that road and just do it.
What is it, reel to reel?
Yeah. I actually have one that a buddy of mine who passed away kind of left to me, and it's in great shape. I have to get an alignment tape for it. Mm-hmm. I've got some new tape and some other stuff for it and everything and I've already cleaned it up quite a bit, but it's there, it's ready to go. So I'm like, man, maybe this is the way.
Sometimes you got to get that media baked too.
Yeah. I mean, it's thankfully, there for a while there was like a tape crisis, and a lot of the stuff that I even did early on, like the Magdalyns stuff we did on tape, and stuff like that, and so there was a worry there for a while. We were reusing tapes, from old projects and things. Like it was a little hairy, and then you get projects on older tapes or from different studios, from somebody's basement, and it's like, this is in the studio I was working at, we're working on these nice Studer machines or whatever. It's like, do we want to put this on the machine? It's gonna be a risk here. Do we need to bake it first? But thankfully that's kind of turned a corner. There's a couple places making tape now, and there's actually one in Lancaster.
There's companies now that are making new 8-tracks.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Like we're in such a renaissance for
crazy
the analog music scene that it's outselling digital.
Yeah, which is awesome.
If you have a studio project where you want to buy a reel-to-reel tape again, you can do it. It'll cost you.
But you can do it.
You can do it, and it's going to sound a million times better than anything digital you're going to come across, because we know, as people who make music, love music, listen to music, we don't hear in digital, we hear in analog.
Right.
We just do.
Right. There's no doubt to that. We don't have digital chips embedded into our brains. What we hear is air moving.
Yeah.
which is analog.
Yeah.
It is digitized along the way, and that changes it, unfortunately. But what we hear is analog. You're right.
There's something, not to get too off topic about it, but there's something about the way you record your music that, even though it is digital, still retains a warmth and a depth that lends itself to analog. And there's got to be some studio trickery on your part that makes it appear that way, sound that way. But like, it seems to me like analog has always been at the fore of your purview, even when recording digitally.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was fortunate, to be alive in a time when I was able to learn in an analog studio, and that's how I learned the trade. Aside from the way I got into recording was because I was writing music and forgetting it, so I bought a 4-track Tascam recorder.
We all had it. We all had that one. Yeah,
I had to have one. So it just evolved from there. But I learned on a big analog 60-channel console with 2-inch tape, splicing tape, and all of that stuff. So I learned why it is that you get a signal to a certain point, or any part of the basic process, why you place microphones the way you do, signal flow, and all that kind of stuff. So when you know the fundamentals of a lot of that and how the sound works, the electrical signal works, you're always considering that as you're doing what you're doing, even if it's digital. And and once you hear that, you don't really unhear it either. So as you work, it's sort of always part of it. But I mean, in my studio, I have the way I mix is analog. I've got a 16-channel, Rupert Neve mixer that I use, and I run my mixes out through that. I'll do processing externally, and generally, I don't want to say it's every time, but for all my stuff, certainly, and it goes back in the box. But at least that way it gets a little bit of that sort of mojo to it, if you will.
The fact that you brought up that too, my band's last record, which was quite a few years ago now, recorded on the same Neve console that Nirvana recorded Nevermind on.
And
the very same. Our friend Cliff Edwards, or Evans rather, he owns that same Neve console.
Really?
There's something really he owns this little, it looks like it's an old in Scranton, a machine shop.
Yeah.
There's no windows, nothing. And we're old friends. And he has this excellent multi-channel, I think it's 30 some odd channel Neve console to DAT.
Yeah.
And it's not quite analog, but I mean, it's damn close.
Yeah. I've recorded on DAT before.
Yeah. It sounded like our records sounded like our shows sounded.
Yeah, that's great.
Coming through that console.
Yeah.
How did you get yours?
I mean, most of the stuff that I have, not everything, but most of it's modern stuff, like the Neve mixer that I have is actually a Rupert Neve design. So it's his latest company before he died. So it's a modern thing that he designed. And the cool thing about it is, it's a Neve. He designed it himself. It's not like there's some Neve stuff out there, AMS Neve Company or the original Neve Company that was designing stuff long after Rupert Neve sold the company or was ever involved. He had nothing to do with the designs, but they bear his name, unfortunately. So there's stuff like that out there, but this is not the case. This is, something he designed, which is really cool. But there's that stuff. There's other stuff that I have that I've acquired a lot of stuff over time. Just about every piece of gear I have. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I've been recording music since the early 2000s. But almost every piece of gear I have has some story to it. Most of the story stuff is guitars, amps, pedals, that kind of stuff. Some of it's stuff that bands have traded me over the years when they couldn't, pay their final tab or whatever the deal was. It's I've got this cool amp or these pedals or whatever. And they know I'm a gear nut. So it's all right, let's work something out, But there's other stuff that there's a couple pieces of gear that I bought, maybe it's either for a particular project or after working on some other project. There's two pieces of gear that I have in my rack this Lexicon PCM70 reverb, and then this Yamaha SPX90 effects unit I bought both of those after working with Andy Wallace. And so Andy Wallace, who has mixed like
Everybody.
many of our favorite 90s records and whatnot, you know, after seeing him work and being in the room with him and seeing how he does what he does and everything. And I'm like, well, I can't afford, at least right now, I can't afford to buy an SSL console, which is like his main thing that he uses and always uses. He doesn't use a lot of outboard stuff, but I'm pretty sure I can afford the reverb unit, the Lexicon, which is a lot, you know, but I can still afford it. Sounds really good. And I could definitely afford the Yamaha SPX90 because they're like $100, you know? So I ended up getting one of those, actually a broken one that I got for like $50 and I ended up fixing. And that's honestly, that's how I got a lot of this stuff too, is all broken stuff that I fixed, you know? So, which is where a lot of this stuff came from. But each one of them has some story. I mean, I've got a couple pieces of gear that used to belong to KRZ, like way back in the day.
Wow.
I have a microphone from one of the DJs. It was Daniels and Webster, whatever. I think it was maybe Jay Daniels, like on-air microphone I have that I got from his program director. I have this really cool old Austrian spring reverb. It's this giant box of a spring reverb that, like, when you think of like the Black Keys or like that sort of sultry, smoky kind of, you know, reverb sound or whatever. That's the sound. It's the AKG reverb, you know?
Yeah.
That was KRZ's on-air reverb that they used for decades. And the guy had it and it wasn't working. And he's like, if you really want it, give me $25 for it. I'm like, yeah, I want it. Oh my God. So take it, bring it home, fix it. And it's like, wow, I plug it in. It's like, that's the Black Keys, you know, or whatever. It's like that kind of sound. I use that heavily on a lot of tracks, but one particular is this project called Do-I Twin, which is Matt from the Magdalyns. That's his project. But there was this song called Digital, and it's got this, like, when I first sent him the mix, he giggled and he's like, wow, I didn't expect it to be as dark as it is. Like, you know, not like tonally dark, but it's just like has this darkness to it. And a lot of it is that weird spring reverb sound, you know, it's that AKG spring reverb.
There's something about those analog effects that it really like stirs something emotionally in us that like an old Crybaby wah can do, or like a Fender Twin reverb, which was my first amp from my first fucking Stratocaster. Sounded like just like the Stevie Ray Vaughan worshiping kid that I was. Like you can't make that sound with any other amp, with any other guitar. And it's a tube amp, and it sounds it's this big, and it sounds 10 feet tall. When it comes to gear, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it all the way, and you have to do it like it's got to be right. It's got to and it's got to bleed.
I agree. It's got to have rough edges to it. Like I've got a lot of you know, a lot of obviously musician friends, but like many of which are into things like Paul Reed Smith guitars and like Mason Boogie amps and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know, I owned a Paul Reed Smith once. I won it in a contest, which was pretty awesome, but I had to get rid of it. It was like, it was too nice. And I can't get into gear that doesn't have like rough edges to it, or like doesn't make me work for the sound, you know. Like I grew up on a Partscaster Telecaster, you know. That was my guitar for like 10 years. That's like all I had, you know.
A Frankencaster.
That's it. You know, that was the Magdalyns guitar. It was a blonde Telecaster, supposedly a 70s Telecaster body with a Bakelite black pick guard. I put a Bigsby on it, and it had a Strat neck on it, so I had a Strat headstock with no name. Like that was all I had, you know. And that was the sound, and it was awesome, and it worked for me, and I made it work for everything.
Well, that's probably that twang that the Magdalyns had right there. I mean, it was set perfectly for the depth of a Strat with the twang of a Tele, and like it was a perfect mix.
It was raw.
You
know, and that's what I love. I love to, you know, work for the sound a little bit. Like I even, you know, for I've never been a huge fan of Gibson guitars, but I own a really nice Les Paul that I got years and years and years ago, really cheap. It's a great guitar, and recently, just this year, or maybe late last year, like I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. Like I'll use it on sessions occasionally, or people come in the studio, they love it. Um, but I used it on this one project, and it was like the perfect fit. This woody, dark, cleaner sound or whatever. Um, but even that plays too nice, and it's like, it doesn't have the same. Like I don't have to fight it as much as a Telly or a Strat.
Give me a Mexican Strat.
Yeah,
Like
that's it.
it's good. It's
Yeah.
good. I mean, and I like an SG or a Les Paul for certain things.
Yeah.
The guitar player of my high school band had a Les Paul Junior that was the Ace Frehley model, the Ace
man.
Frehley from Kiss model, and he sheared the headstock off of it playing in the basement once, and a luthier at Gianetta Music glued it back together for him, and it sounded fucking better.
Probably Gene Matisco.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah,
it was.
yeah. Which is amazing. Yeah.
And we recorded there later on, but
Nice.
you know what I mean? Like he glued it back together. It sounded crazier.
Wow.
Because we were like a collective of 90s alt rock and I was the only hardcore kid in the band.
Yeah.
And we just had this crazy mix of people. It worked. And this guitar player who was like somewhere between wanting to be in Pearl Jam and somewhere wanting to be in the Misfits or Black Flag, it worked. And he was such a good guitar player. Like he was from that Stevie Ray Vaughan school of things. It was just great. And to hear him struggle with this like guitar that made him bleed a little bit.
Yeah. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how you get that out. Otherwise it's just like buttery shred, and it's like there's no emotion to that. It's if you're not fighting the guitar a little bit to get the sound out of it, to get the emotion out of it, it's
not
easy.
blues. It's not blues based anymore.
Yeah,
that's why
right.
it starts to become Eddie Van Halen. And as much as Eddie Van Halen was a virtuoso, I don't cry when I listen to Women and Children First.
Yeah, right.
But when I hear Texas Flood, I get a little emotional.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean, it's a different beast.
Yeah.
But I could talk gear with you forever, but
oh yeah.
What is your what's your guitar now? What is your guitar like right now?
I've always been and always will be a Telecaster player. I also have really grown the last couple of years to love Jazzmasters a lot. I always wanted one, like as a kid. I could never really afford one. I always had the parts casters or whatever.
Yeah.
But I got this really cool Jazzmaster. It must be like 10 years ago now or whatever. And it was just like a Mexican one, like a Fender. I think it was a classic player one or something like that, which is just like run of the mill, but it was a ding and dent model, and got it a little cheaper. That thing is amazing. It is incredible. The neck is so good on it. It is so like consistent. The pickups are great. They're actually very hot.
Yeah.
Really, really nice. And I really like that guitar a lot. So between that and a Telecaster, I'm very much at home.
You probably don't lose intonation all that much on that one either.
No, it's great. It's not like the older ones with the rounder radius and everything. It's like it's great, man. It's got the two-pneumatic bridge, so you don't have to worry about strings popping out or any of that kind of stuff. It's like it's meant to be played, and I want to play it.
I just as many like metal based and hardcore based bands I've been in where like they're playing, there's a lot of Gibson happening, a lot of Paul Reed Smith happening.
Yep.
Like the when you think of virtuoso metal bands, you're going to think of Iron Maiden at some point, and guess what? They're playing Strats, dude.
Right. Exactly.
No ESPs. None of that. None of that. No Schecters. None of that stuff. It's. There's something very working class and also just like user friendly out of the box.
Yeah.
About the Japanese Strats have very little to be desired, but if a Mexican Strat to an American made one that they don't do anymore, but back in the day you can get them. They're just very warm.
Yeah.
Very, very real. Like it's a part of your arm.
Yeah.
Like
You can
feel
connect
it.
with them easily.
Yeah. Same thing with my old P bass. There's just it feels right.
Yeah. I've got that right next to me here. I've got a Mexican P bass that I bought
Yep.
for $100.
Yep.
And I literally fell out of the back of a truck in pieces and I put it back together, one of those things. But that's the bass that I use for everything,
Mhm.
If people don't come in and have a bass, like it's either the P bass or I've got a jazz bass too.
I
I've
have
got
one too.
some other stuff. Yeah. I've got an amazing, high end bass that I have that again, I've lucked into. It's got a story, but like
Yep.
I don't play that. I play this $100 P bass, because that's what sounds right to me and it feels right. And I even had a friend of mine who, I respect. He's, somebody that I looked up to kind of coming up playing and everything. Great bass player. He brought over this beautiful handmade, P bass, 60s copy or whatever, basically, and really, really nice bass. And he let me borrow it for a while and I played that and I'm like, I don't like it as much as this Mexican one. I have to be
Yep.
honest.
Yep.
I really don't.
I had the Geddy Lee like signature model jazz. I sold it.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't like it as much.
Wow.
I just didn't, and it was
Yeah.
a hard won thing. I mean, I love Rush. That's
Yeah.
that's a punk rock pariah thing to say, but I really don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Rush. They're phenomenal. It just didn't move me. It
Yeah.
didn't do anything. And I have a 5-string jazz that does move me. But
Yeah.
guess what country that was made in? Like it wasn't the high end one. It wasn't the $3,000 model.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to be flashy to be awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I think the point that we're both trying to come at, and when you assembled this project, you weren't doing like these massive productions where you were hiring orchestras
Right.
per se. Maybe the strings were organic in some points. They certainly sounded like
Yeah.
it.
I had a friend of mine actually in the Ukraine play those.
Oh, no kidding.
And before everything went down, but
Yeah.
he just it was just him, and I overdubbed some synth stuff in there with it to give it a little more fullness, but he played all that stuff and it was incredible. But live strings,
God, amazing. But like you're not coming at it with this like massive budget. It's just
right.
Here's what's at my disposal right now. Boom, 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 boom. Sounds massive. You don't have to go out there and like spend a fortune on
No.
the high end guitars and this, that, and the other thing. You can just take what's at your disposal and make something very real. I have a Korg workstation right up there that I've made incredible
I can
music
see it
on.
now. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Like it's just if you can get a tuba and get a sound out of it, like art, like that's music. That's the essence of music.
Yeah, and that's like I've because I do the studio thing and everything, I have people ask me a lot, like, what do you recommend or what's the best program or whatever. And it's like my answer is always, always, always like whatever is gonna cause the least friction for you as an artist, And if it's someone, like I don't know, like I recently talked to my brother-in-law about it, who ended up going down the Pro Tools route, and I'm very proud of him because he did it and he learned it. I didn't think he was going to, but he did. But like for him, I even recommended like one of the all-in-one units, like the Korg. I'm like, if you come from that, quote unquote analog world or whatever, where you have the faders in front of you, the buttons in front of you, and it's intuitive and you kind of know it, like just use that so that you don't have obstacles in front of you impeding your progress toward making the music that you're ultimately here to create. Just don't let it get in the way, whatever it ultimately ends up being.
Yeah, it's all about accessibility, and that's that harkens back to every musician that I think we both kind of look up to. They were using what was in front of them, what was available. It's not about the equipment. It's about the attitude, the spirit that you bring to it. And I think truly when Sleeplore happened, when I heard it and I knew it was you, and I having known where you had come from, it really inspired me because like here's this thing that like is being done by you by yourself basically,
Yeah.
and it was very expansive. It was very unique and beautiful, and there's not a whole lot of that happening right now, especially in this area.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to thank you for giving me something to believe in this area again.
Well, man, I don't know what to say to that. Thank you. Thank you sincerely. I mean, that's like, kind of like closer when we opened, we were talking about like just getting random messages from people about like, hey, I heard this today and like it meant something or whatever. You're like,
Yeah.
I really needed this today. Or, I was in a dark place and then I heard this or whatever. It's like, man, if like even if I just heard that one time ever, during this project or whatever, it would be worth it, like,
Yeah.
but to hear people say that or be able to connect with this stuff, or at least like, have people, I don't know, like I've had the other thing that's happened too is like, I definitely have noticed some people out there in the region or whatever, like trying to emulate or copy certain things or whatever in a way. And, I think at one point, and many people, may feel this way today, but at one point in my life, I might have like gotten upset or whatever and been like, oh, that person's doing what I'm doing or whatever. And it's not even musically, it's more of like, pursuing the same, strategy in terms of releasing music or press or whatever the case may be. And it's like, I'm what that tells me is that like that person paid attention to what I'm doing and
Yeah.
like it reached somebody, and that's amazing,
Yeah.
like for somebody's paying attention to what I'm actually doing. So that's really cool,
Yeah, that means that all that means is you're influential. It has nothing to do
Yeah.
with trying to rip you off or slight you in any way. It's just
Yeah.
you
And
led
if
the
I can, and
you
if I
led the
can, like,
charge.
yeah. And if I, like I didn't invent any of this stuff. So like if I can help someone else find that path or show them, shine a little light on a little bit of the path or show them the way to one thing or whatever, like, then that's a part of this too, is just like, I love helping people in all, aspects of my life. So like if I'm doing that in any way and in this project and saying like, hey, you can, sit in your space, whatever your space looks like, where you create music and just record music and put it out there and have people hear it and give a shit about it, that's cool. And if I can show you that that's possible, then that's cool. And that I think that goes back to like the, you know, I don't know, the days of talking about like the punk aesthetic, maybe not just the music, but like the punk or DIY aesthetic of like recording music and me encouraging people to record their own shit. Like,
Yeah.
if you get stuck, reach out. And, if you need someone to mix it or master it, reach out. Like I'll help you with that stuff, but there's nothing more important than having the time. And when you go into a studio, if you're paying by the hour, by the day or whatever, like that time becomes shorter and more finite. But if you can enable yourself to expand that time frame to be able to create and like actually get the good takes out of a good performance, that is infinitely more important than the sound quality. If you get an amazing capture of a brilliant song or even a half brilliant song, that is so much more important than going into like a world-class studio and having it be rushed and getting a terrible performance.
Yeah.
So
Fuck, that's a great way to end this. That was a perfect riff. So I do want to kind of like get from you though, if you wanted to, or if you were to kind of leave our listeners with one thing about, what it is that you love about what you do, what you love about music in general, what would it be?
man, I think like for me, music is an outlet. And, I think everyone on this earth needs some type of creative outlet, whatever that is, whether it's music, whether it's cooking, painting, it could be, working on bicycles,
Mm.
it could be, building furniture, whatever that is. Like everyone needs some type of outlet, some type of creative outlet. So if you're not currently going after whatever that is, or if you haven't found that yet, you need it. And that makes you in some way better, balanced, more balanced, and a better person to be able to just show up to everyday life. So find whatever that thing is and do it, and do it on a regular basis. And if it's a matter of prioritizing your life or whatever, like people around you, family, whatever the case it is, involve them. You know, involve them in that thing. They can be part of it too. You know, just find that outlet and do it.
And when the next body of work comes along, would you come back on here and hang out with us again?
Yeah, totally. This was fun, man. I
Awesome,
really appreciate the opportunity and just, you know, the hang.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Next time you play around here, I know I missed you the last time because stuff was going on here. I won't miss it again. I
all
won't
good.
miss it again.
It's all good. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, there will be some opportunity at some point. I've already have people asking, but we'll see what it ultimately looks like. But yeah, there'll be another opportunity for sure.
All right, brother.
Awesome, man. Good talking with you.
Likewise, good to see you.
You too.
Talk
Bye-bye.
to you soon. Bye-bye.
And that's it, folks. My hang with Clyde of Sleeplore. As evidenced by the music playing behind me, everything I've extolled about the virtues of this music, to my estimation, is very accurate. I'm so transfixed by this. I hope you go out there and you buy a copy of one of his records. I hope you buy a t-shirt. I hope you listen. I hope you find something in it to help your soul the way it helps mine. He's been Clyde. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Take care of each other, everybody. We're all we've got. Good night.